Welcome in, Memphis. And after 28 years, Mike Ceide, the legendary Memphis sportscaster, is calling it quits. But before he steps away from WREG, he sits down with me. So, Mike, 28 years, I imagine you thought about the last show. I don't know if you did, but did you ever think it was going to be with me on the digital desk here?
I was going to say, you haven't been here very long, but look at how well you've acclimated yourself. You get the final words from a guy who's been around WREG for almost 28 years. So it's great just to sit down with you. We're doing this, just moments after my last show. So pretty emotional. The bigness of it, I guess, is the best way to talk about it. But let's just talk about what almost 30 years in Memphis looks like for an old guy like me.
Well, 28 years, you just did your last on-air broadcast. Has it sunk in that it's over yet?
I don't think so. I think maybe next week, when I wake up and realize that I'm not doing the same thing that I've been doing since I was 21 years old. I mean, graduated from the University of Florida, 2 weeks without a job, and James Smith, Lake Charles, Louisiana, reached out, one of two tapes I sent out. And yes, we sent tapes out back in the day. I got a call from my mom that some James Smith in Lake Charles, Louisiana wanted to talk to me, and that led to starting this. But I've only known one thing, so I don't know what the what's next is for me, but I'm very proud of what I've done over 35 years and including the last almost 28 here in the Bluff City.
So on this episode here, we're going to kind of take a walk through memory lane here, if you will. But you just mentioned that you graduate the University of Florida. Did you know you wanted to be a sports broadcaster?
Yeah, actually, I was a broadcast major, but I was a law minor, and I graduated with a 3.9 in law, but a 3.132 in communications. And I went the communications route because I told myself that there's too many lawyers out there. And of course, wouldn't you know it, that just a few years later, my youngest of younger brothers wound up to be a lawyer. So, but I just really, I was an athlete growing up. I could talk sports, and it was just something I was always told, if you loved your job, you wouldn't work a day in your life. And I knew that if I could talk sports and it could be a career, that it'd be something that was pretty cool. And it wound up to just be so much more than I ever thought it was going to be, starting from a small market like Lake Charles. By the way, home of McNeese State. You probably know of McNeese from last year's NCAA tournament, but starting there and then really building my brand and my legacy here at WREG over the last 27 plus almost 28 years.
So it wasn't Lake Charles to Memphis. Was there another stop in between?
Yeah, right on the Louisiana-Texas border, you have Lake Charles on one side and then Beaumont, Texas on the other. And that's what I did. I was weekend anchor in Lake Charles for a couple of years, and then I went right across the border to Beaumont. And that was really one of the, in market sizes where things are graded as, there's like 200 television stations. Lake Charles was like 189. And then Beaumont was 140 in the 140s. But that market allowed me to cover 3 Super Bowls with the Dallas Cowboys, went to training camp with the Cowboys and the Oilers when they were still in Houston, covered the Astros in the Astrodome. That's right. It's not just a song. There was an act. They actually played baseball and football inside the Astrodome back in the day. And that market really, I think, elevated me, because it made me want to be so much better, because you got the opportunity to rub elbows with some of the biggest markets in the country, and you're in little Beaumont, Texas, but you wanted to rough up your shoulders and realize, I can hang with these guys. And then when I got the opportunity to come here, little did I know that this might be the most unique sports market in the country, because not only do we have our Memphis Tigers, but there's such a passionate following for Tennessee and Ole Miss and Mississippi State and Arkansas. And that's not even to mention the rest of the SEC schools that have fan bases in the 901, and just the ability to be able to talk about so many different programs. And then lo and behold, after being told no by the NFL a couple of different times, we became a professional sports town with the Grizzlies in 2000. And to be able to follow that team from their inception, obviously they were in Vancouver for a few years, but from their inception as being the Memphis Grizzlies to right now, what a ride that was. for me.
Let me ask you this, because I know what it's like to, get a call and pick up everything you have and move to some place that you've never been to. So it's 1997, right? You're in Beaumont, Texas.
Yep.
And you get do you get a call? Did you come into Memphis for the interview, or what was that? How did you go from Texas to Memphis? And had you ever been to Memphis?
No, I'd never been to Memphis. I've always been a Southern boy. Grew up in Fort Lauderdale and Miami, and I went to Florida, and then I went to Louisiana and Texas, but I'd never been to Memphis. Obviously, knew of Elvis Presley and things like that.
So did WREG see a tape and they were like, this guy, we want Mike Ceide?
What's funny is I sent a tape back in the day. You'd sent tape to one of these companies that would stockpile tapes, and news directors would say, hey, I'm looking for this, this, and this. And it just so happened that WREG, my tape was something that they were looking at. Craig Jahelka at the time, who was the news director here, liked it enough to bring me in. And, I sat down with the late, great George Lapidus and Glenn Carver, who was my mentor here for 20 years. We worked together and kind of just hit it off. And they kind of offered me an opportunity. I was about to be a father for the first time. So I got here in December, and my son was born in July of the following year. And then my daughter came, the November of 99. So I wasn't born here, but because my kids' roots were here, they were born here. This has become my adopted hometown, and really the only hometown I've known, for the better part of half of my life, because I've been here and I've bled the blue of the 901, or the Beale Street blue of the 901, for almost 28 years.
Well, we're going to start. I want to kind of take you on a journey here, because I got a few bullet points, and you just kind of follow me a little bit. Okay. So in 97, did you cover at all? Because this is one of the great sports trivia questions, in my opinion. Where did the Tennessee Oilers play? And it was in Memphis for like 1 year, right?
Right. In 97, when I got here, they moved to Memphis, and they were supposed to stay here until their stadium was finished in Nashville. But there wasn't a great support for the home team. As a matter of fact, I remember watching a game, and I think it was the Steelers against the Tennessee Titans, or I forgot what they were called here, the Memphis Oilers. I can't remember what it was.
Tennessee Oilers.
The Tennessee Oilers. So, but there were more fans for the opposing team, and it just didn't work. That the Titans decided at that time, Oilers/Titans decided at that time, we're not doing this in Memphis anymore. We're actually going to go play at Vandy until our stadium is finished in Nashville. So, when I got here in 97, it was the craziest thing. Is I started December 15th of 97, and 2 weeks later, Peyton Manning was taking the Tennessee Volunteers into Miami to play in the Orange Bowl. And I was like, oh my goodness, I get the job in Beaumont, and then I get to go home. I was born in Miami and lived in South Florida until I went to college, but I was too raw. They didn't think I was ready to go do that story. So I wasn't able to do that. But lo and behold, a year later, Peyton graduates, goes to the Colts, gets drafted. T. Martin takes over Tennessee, and Tennessee goes to play in Tempe, Arizona. And they beat Florida State for the national title. And I was at that game in Tempe. But to believe it or not, the biggest thing that I remember about Tennessee, Florida State, besides the Vols winning the national title, was the fact that I was covering that game a year after I got there. And I always thought to myself, well, I wasn't ready to do the Orange Bowl, but here I am ready enough to do the national title game. So that was fun. And
a year later, Calipari comes to town in 2000, I believe. Was that, how big of a deal was that?
It was big because, he had been successful at UMass and then had some trouble with UMass, and then became the Nets coach, and then didn't really had his issues with the NBA. But it was that big name, and there was such a lull in Tiger basketball, if I remember correctly, during that time, that, it had been a struggle. Tick Price had been here and things like that. It just wasn't working out. So to be able to land Calipari, and then, in the first couple of years, there were some rough seasons. It was NITs. But then all of a sudden, oh, man, they went to the NIT. And then the next year they won the NIT. And then they're back in the NCAA tournament. And once that started to roll, and Calipari started to get recruits in here, probably none bigger than Derrick Rose, who was the number one pick with the Bulls after his one season here. That was a special time when that Tiger basketball team made that run to Final Four, Sweet 16s to Elite Eights to a Final Four in the national championship in 2008. That season, that run, that team really galvanized this city. And Hoop City had gone away for a few years, but it returned with a vengeance there, because not long after that, the Grizzlies, their losing ways turned into core four, grit, grind, to where we became prideful again. We were able to puff out our chest and our shirts that said Memphis across it, because we became something that people wanted to be, and that was successful.
Where does that Final Four rank in all-time Mike Ceide sports coverage moments?
Well, the thing was, back in those days when we covered those tournaments, Glenn Carver and I, Glenn would go in the first two rounds. So he had the first round and the round of 32. Then I would go with that team to the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight. And then after that, if they made it further again, Glenn, being sports director at the time, would obviously go to the Final Four and the national championship game. So it was great for me, because I got a lot of those, Sweet 16s, Elite Eights, right when they were on the cusp. But that magical season of 07 and 08, I kind of just got the precursor. And I remember being at NRG Stadium in Houston. The stadium was pretty much brand new. And just to watch Memphis go in there and dismantle Michigan State and Texas on the run. And then everybody was like, I know they were a number one seed, and I know they had 30-plus wins because they dominated their conference. But that's when everybody was like, okay, look out. And then I remember the dunk over Kevin Love. It was just, there's so many magical moments. And unfortunately, what was a big lead at the end of the championship game, where we're about to celebrate a title as a city, and everybody talks about the parades that may or may not have been.
What was it like? I mean, take us. It's like 17 years ago. I mean, that Final Four was kind of legendary because it was all 4 1 seeds go to the Final Four. But what was it like walking around in Memphis when you got Derrick Rose, you got Calipari? The team was ranked number 1 in the country. I can't even fathom that. I mean, I was 9 years old, but what was it like in the city?
You're talking about CDR and Robert Dozier and Antonio Anderson and Joey Dorsey. I mean, this was just a layered team that could beat you in so many different ways, and it showed it throughout that tournament. What they did, they just had their way with everybody, and then they were even having their way with Kansas. Everybody was playing so well. The lead, 8 or 9 points with just 2 minutes to go in the game, and then all of a sudden, the shots that were falling didn't. And I remember being in the newsroom right here at Channel 3, because, again, Glenn was in San Antonio with Alex and a lot of people, because everybody wanted to be there for that moment. We sent a lot of people, but I was here, and they were like, okay, we're going to go to San Antonio, and then we're going to come back to you, and you'll talk about how crazy it is on Beale Street. So in the closing minutes of that game, the monitor behind me had a shot of Beale Street, and it was packed like I've never seen it before. People were just ready to explode on a national. We were going to be national champions. Remember, this is a Tiger team that made it to the Final Four and the national championship game, 3.5 decades earlier. And now we had another opportunity to do that. And then all of a sudden, things didn't go right, but we still had a chance. And Mario Chalmers, who would later become a Grizzly, by the way, hits the big shot, sends it to overtime. And, when the game was over, they still came back to me, and I pointed at the monitor because Beale Street was deserted. I can't imagine being the fans that were out there ready to celebrate and then taking that gut punch, because, as you mentioned, it's been 17 years later, and just bringing it up right now, I'm sure, is getting Tiger fans sick to their stomach, because I'm kind of sick to my stomach, because it was both one of the biggest moments of my career and then one of the most disappointing, because we couldn't hit free throws. We didn't foul. Even if we did foul, they didn't call it. And then you lose a heartbreaker in overtime, and you're just like, will we be this close again? And unfortunately, we haven't been since.
And Calipari leaves shortly after that. And I do want to talk about 2018, excuse me. Penny Hardaway joins Memphis as the head coach. What was that like? I mean, because he was a high school coach, but obviously had this like legendary kind of aura around him of growing up in Memphis. What was that like when you found out Penny Hardaway was going to be the next coach of the Tigers? And what was it like in the city as well?
Well, let me take you back for a second. You mentioned when Cal left. I remember vividly, it happened after a Sweet 16 loss in Arizona. And I was there, and the rumors to Kentucky had been out. And I remember asking Cal straight out, right when we started, about Kentucky. And, you know, he gave the coach speak answer of, I love Memphis. Look what we built here in Memphis. And I bring that up because the very next day, the helicopters are flying over his house. People are out of his, and he's sneaking. And of course, he takes the Kentucky job. That's the other gut punch that Tiger fans took of, you know, you had 08, we were close, you know, why not stay? But Kentucky's one of those jobs that I think, you know, once you let it all sink in, that how many coaches are going to turn down Kentucky no matter where they're at. But yeah, fast forward, Josh Pastner had some success here. And then the Tubby Smith couple of seasons where he was here, there was just nobody in the arena. The recruiting was awful. The team just was barely something that excited the city. And here comes Penny Hardaway, who had only coached in high school. I was about to say had done nothing but he had coached in high school, had led East to state titles, was still learning how to be a coach. But when you're Penny Hardaway, one of the 2 or 3 biggest names, if not the biggest name in the history of this program, and you're given an opportunity to coach at your alma mater, he took it. And I remember being in Murfreesboro, we sent Jeff Woods, our photographer, when East was playing for a state title. And Penny had to talk about the Memphis job while the Mustangs were trying to win a state championship, with a number of guys that then turned out to join Penny at Memphis. But that was one of those moments that I think everybody said, okay, you know what? We're back. We're back. Penny Hardaway, I know he's still learning how to coach, and he's going to have to learn how to coach at the college level. He'll surround himself with good coaches. But we have Penny Hardaway. Imagine if you're a high school player and you remember Penny Hardaway, the NBA legend. And if you're in Memphis, you know the name because he's this city's biggest name when it comes to basketball. And I think Penny has had his moments. I think Penny over the last, I think this is his 7th year, has learned the nuances of being a college coach and what he can and can't do, what he needed to get better at, and surrounding himself with better people. And, you know, I think he'll tell you that the only goal is that the University of Memphis should never not make the NCAA tournament. You should be in the NCAA tournament every year. When you think of Kansas, when you think of Kentucky, when you think of Alabama, when you think of even Houston now, those programs, I don't think at the beginning of the year nobody's asking them, hey, are you going to make the tournament this year? I know you got an entirely new roster. Are you going to make it? I think they just expect to. And I think that's where Penny wants to bring this program to. And it would help if he didn't have to rebuild his roster every year. But there is a sense of me and excitement of what he's brought together with this team. No real alpha dogs, just 15 dogs, so guys that are going to work together. And it could be a fun season. I just wish they played in a better conference where, you know, they didn't have to win 28 or 29 games and only lose 2 in conference. And if you don't beat teams by 20, you only win by 8. It's a mark against you because you're playing in the American. But I digress. But that was a great moment. I was at Penny's press conference, and you could just feel it, not just from Tiger fans and Memphis. You felt it from Penny Hardaway. And how many times can you remember Penny being like really energized about something? I mean, the guy's played in the NBA. He's played in the NBA Finals, and he was really, really jacked up about the opportunity to raise the stature of his alma mater. And I think he's done that even though he hasn't made it past the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. I think that's coming very, very soon for Penny.
What's the biggest difference, do you think, between covering the University of Memphis basketball as opposed to the NBA team here? Because we haven't really touched on that yet, and I do want to talk about it quickly because I know you have to get out of here because it's getting late. But the Grizzlies get here. It's 2001. I mean, what's it like seeing? I mean, you've been here every step of the way for this NBA team in Memphis.
I think the newness of it really we grabbed a hold of that. But then when they started playing, it's like, oh my gosh, these guys aren't very good. But you think back and, you know, the first season you roll out and you have Shane Battier, you have Pau Gasol, you have Lorenzen Wright, which was another iconic player, rest his soul, that used to play at Memphis. And, you know, but we were a professional sports town. And I mentioned it where the NFL, we were so close when I think the team went to they gave an expansion team to Jacksonville and somebody else, I can't remember, maybe it was Carolina, but we were supposed to get that team. That was supposed to be Memphis's team. And now you look back 25 years later, and Nashville has the NFL team. But that's okay because we got the Grizzlies. And, there was those baby steps of they just weren't very good. And then, oh my gosh, they made the playoffs, got swept. The next year they made the playoffs, got swept. The third year in a row, they made the playoffs and made NBA history, I think, when they got swept again. 12 straight playoff losses. So you were like, okay, is this what it's going to be like? And then all of a sudden, Marc Gasol, Powell's little brother, played high school basketball at Lausanne, was a 7-foot chubby guy that could shoot from outside. The Lakers had him. And then two brothers get traded for one another. And everybody's like, we gave up Powell for what? And then Marc Gasol became an NBA Defensive Player of the Year. He became a stalwart in the middle. And when you remember Mike Conley, Kyle Lowry, those were 2 point guards. And at the time, you were wondering which one was going to be shipped out. And Lionel Hollins stuck with Mike Conley. And to this day, Harrison, I've covered a lot of players. To this day, Mike Conley, and my days are over now. Mike Conley was the best athlete I ever spent quality time with because always nice to the media, always had a smile on his face. Even when he was injured and didn't play, he gave us time. I really enjoyed my time with Mike. And then so when that core four got together and Tony Allen ripped out those words of grit and grind, and then this city had itself a mantra. And from then on, we became a team you just didn't want to play because we got you in the mud. It didn't matter who you were. Kobe Bryant, the late Kobe Bryant, told you that Tony Allen was the best defender he's ever played against. We just made it hard on people. And then we started winning games. You beat the Spurs. An 8 seed beats a 1. You go to the Western Conference Finals. The Oklahoma City Thunder teams, when they were young and had all of those players of Kevin Durant, the Beard, and Russell Westbrook, and it became a rivalry. I remember making that drive, 7.5-hour drive to Oklahoma City because it seemed we played every year. And, that gave us a purpose. And I think it gave this city a battle cry. And Memphis versus everybody, because the feeling of disrespect over the years, not getting the NFL, and we still see it today of all the negative talk around the city of Memphis. But those of us within the city limits, those of us in the Mid-South, we rally together around the Grizzlies and around the Tigers, around our sports teams, and it's been fun to watch. My last week, this week, I actually, during Grizzlies Media Day, I went down, but it wasn't so much to talk to John, Jaron, and things like that. I just wanted to walk around FedEx Forum because I was there when they were building it. And there wasn't a sporting event in that building that I either wasn't at or wasn't covering because, that's where our teams played. And I just wanted to kind of take one last walk around because I had a media pass that I won't have anymore. I'm going to have to buy my tickets inside to see these teams play. But, I think it became where the Grizzlies had turned things around and the Tigers weren't making NCAA tournaments when Cal left, that you really had a dividing line. You had Grizzly fans and you had Tiger fans. There was very little overlap between the two. I think we're getting to the point now where people really enjoy both sets of our Hoop City teams because both are doing well.
When you kind of look at the future, I know you're about to walk out the door in 20 minutes or so. It does kind of feel like this city wants to find some team to wrap their arms around, whether that be the University of Memphis football right now, unbelievable start to the year, or Ja Morant and the Grizzlies going forward. Do you think these fans in Memphis, which, it's a great sports city, underrated sports city, and I know you know that as well as anyone, do you think they will eventually kind of get their celebration moment? Do you think it could come? And if so, what do you think it will be?
Again, I think with realignment has really hurt the Tigers because they deserve better. People have said, hey, go do A, B, C, and D. And the Tigers, University of Memphis, went out and did A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And, the Big 12, here's a $200 million check.
And we've talked about that on this, and I've kind of thrown this idea out there. Tell me if I'm crazy, Mike. If Silverfield and the Tigers go make the playoff this year, and you're the ACC or some other conference, who wouldn't want these guys?
I think, unfortunately, it's more about the TV households and things like that, things that Memphis doesn't have any control over because people moving in and out of the city and things like that. To me, the eye test, to me, the things that you've worked on, the $225 million that's been put into Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium for the start of the 2026 season. Yeah, it's not going to be like some of these stadiums that you go to, like Neyland Stadium or Tuscaloosa. It's not going to look like that. But for Memphis and 40,000, it's going to look brand new. I just don't understand how you take teams like UCF and Houston and you give them opportunities, and the ACC has taken teams from across the country, and Memphis is right here in a proving ground, and all they've done is prove it. They own the longest winning streak in the country right now. Ryan Silverfield's like 30-6 at home. They've beaten 6 straight Power 4 teams at home. 4 of them against the SEC. Arkansas came here, lost, and then had to fire their coach in Sam Pittman. So they've done everything. But I go back to that $200 million to the Big 12. Here's $200 million. Don't pay us any TV rights fees for 5 years. And by the way, in those 5 years, if we haven't done enough to amp up the conference in your eyes, cut us loose. To me, that's a no-lose proposition for the Big 12. And they said, yeah, you know what? No. And we had the backing, the Tigers had the backing of huge companies like AutoZone and FedEx and things like that. And again, the Big 12 is not blowing anybody over in football, but can you imagine the Tigers joining the Big 12 in basketball, what that would mean for that conference?
Touch on that a little bit. What would that mean? I mean, if Memphis were to join the Big 12, how could that change the landscape for this university?
Well, I just use the Big 12 because that's the one that I think that everyone has been nearest and dearest to in terms of what would be the best fit. Obviously, Dr. Ed Scott's done a tremendous job in his 18 months on the job, and the Pac-12, the new look Pac-12, wanted Memphis, and Ed Scott said, you know what? No, it's not a good deal for us. And a lot of Memphis fans were like, wait a minute, we have a chance to go to the Power 5. The new look Pac-12 is not the 5th best conference. I mean, the American might be that with the teams that they have in it, but if you put Memphis in the Big 12, just in football, imagine some of those teams, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, some of those teams coming into the sim instead of, and I mean no disrespect, but instead of the Rices or the UABs that come in right now. But in basketball, that conference has made runs, in the NCAA tournament. And now you put Penny Hardaway and the Tigers in that, and those are the conference opponents that are coming into the Forum. So instead of having 8, 9, 10,000 people watching Penny and the Tigers play in the American, you're going to talk about getting close to 14, 15,000 to see those kind of games. So that's what it means. And the ability for Memphis to compete in this day of NIL, you need to be in the Power 4, because as good as the American wants to be, there's no way you can look at them and then look at the Power 4 and look at the payouts being 6, 7, 8-fold more in the Power 4 than in the Group of 5. And as the college football playoffs starts to get worked on, the Power 4, the SEC, the ACC, the Big 10, they're going to try to put their foot down and try to bury the Group of 5 as much as they can so they can keep that money to themselves. And I understand that. But for right now, there's an opportunity for a Group of 5 team every year to go to the playoff. And you mentioned it. Right now, Memphis is that team to beat. So imagine Memphis, Ohio State, or Memphis, Texas in the first round of the college football playoff. And you just never know. You talk about exciting a city. Imagine if the 2025 Tigers are that Group of 5 team that's going to be the final 12 standing, and they can put that on their board that they were a playoff team just 2 or 3 years after the college football playoff started. Because back in the day, when it was just 2 teams or 4 teams, nobody was really getting in. I think Cincinnati got in as a Group of 5 team, but it was very, very scarce. But now there's a legitimate way every year until they change it that a Group of 5 team is going to get in. And this year it's going to come out of the American. But you have Memphis and Tulane and South Florida and those kind of teams. North Texas is unbeaten right now, but I think it comes out of this conference. And right now, Memphis is the team to beat because they have South Florida home, Tulane home, Navy home at the end of the year. So they'll be in the building that they don't lose in with their biggest games left. Just don't get tripped up on those road games that you're supposed to win as a probably double-digit favorite.
I'm curious, after 28 years of covering Memphis sports, what are you most excited to see as a fan?
That's a good question.
Because I saw Jeff Woods, legendary WREG photographer, posted on Facebook. He's having a hot dog and a cold beer at the Memphis football game. I mean, is that something that you're going to be doing? Are fans going to be seeing you in the stands?
Oh, they'll see me in the stands. Again, I'm making this transition because of my grandson that's 5 months old, and I want to be there for everything with him. But my family has always taken a backseat to the job, and our jobs are hard. A lot of people don't understand. I use the Wizard of Oz analogy that you don't see all the work that we do, and this is not me. This is everybody in the broadcasting TV business. How hard it is. So you don't see the work behind the curtain. And I want to rip those curtains down and kind of just be a father and a partner and a grandfather and enjoy those times. And it's like, hey, there's a game. Oh, what? Memphis is playing Tulane. They're both undefeated. There's only 2 weeks left in the season. I got to buy some tickets. And I want to be able to scream with excitement, which you can't do in a press box. And I've learned that as you try to get really excited and you have to hold it in. I don't want to hold it in anymore. I want to give this city the love that I have for the teams that I love here and be able to kind of show it. I will miss the interactions, whether it's Penny or Ryan Silverfield or Ja or Jaron or getting to know these new players on the Tiger basketball team, Coach Simmons and everything like that. I'll miss those interactions, but I'm kind of excited to just be a fan. I mean, Harrison knows I'm very passionate about my teams, and now I can scream like I do crazily for my hometown teams as the Tigers, because you don't want to do that. Oh, is that Mike Ceide, the sports guy, going absolutely crazy on this? And I want to be able to do that without having some side eyes coming at me. And I guess I might be able to try to do that here over the next couple of weeks.
Final thing, Mike, before we finally let you loose and out of this building. Do you lose key access tonight?
I think so. I think like at 12. So it's coming up here soon. And that's going to be weird. The drive this morning, I was like, I've made this drive for like 30 years. I even went to get something to eat tonight, and I told the guy that I've seen so many times that this was my last time. And it's like, you just get into a routine of what life gives you. And some of us do it for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years or 20. I've been lucky enough to do it for almost 28 in the same building with a lot of the same people, with the same viewers. And then we actually got more as we started to be better at what we did. And again, Glenn Carver gets a lot of credit for that, of kind of pushing the envelope of, just be better. And I'm just glad. I've used this a lot over the last couple of weeks, is that while my family, and I have a blended family that I love, while my family is my legacy, this station is my legacy too, because as I said, I've almost spent half my life here, and we battled from being second or third in the Memphis market to now being the number one station in the market, the number one sports department in the market, the number one sports show in the market with Friday Sports Overtime. All of these things didn't come without hard work, and I'm very prideful of that. And I know that the guys that are staying with Colin and Frank that are coming, and I know they're just going to keep elevating our sports department. But I'm just very appreciative of the people that actually took the time to tune in and become friends, because a lot of people have stopped me on the street and told me how much they love what I do, and that's all that's meaningful.
And I want to end on that. I think that's probably the coolest thing. You talk about your legacy, and obviously the grandkids more important than the job. But I do think it's really cool. I mean, 28 years is a lot of time, and you think about all the generations of Memphians and sports fans in this city who have had the pleasure of watching you on TV. Any message to them?
Well, stop telling me how old I am. I bump into people all the time, and they're like, I work with one. Colin Cody, when he first got the job here, he's like, you guys were my favorite station, and I watched you when I was a kid. And now these last couple of weeks, it's always been, I've watched you since I was a kid. Okay, we've got it. I'm old. You're young. No, but to be able to hold on to people for that long and realize that you kind of have a connection with people, and maybe it started with grandma and grandpa, and then went to mom and dad, and now it filtered to them. And those kids like Colin, now 20, 30 years old, like you are, Harrison, and now they're starting to have memories, and you when they have families that, unfortunately they won't be able to see me, but maybe with the brand of WREG. But that has always been something that meant something to me. It was an annoyance to my kids and family at times, where people would come up and want to talk when you're at dinner and things like that. But you realize that you're important to the people of Memphis in my very small way, because I always prided myself on being that part of the newscast where a lot of times there's a lot of bad news, but maybe I could put a smile on somebody's face if their team is X and they won, or the Grizzlies did this, or the Tigers did this, or the Vols did that. And for a moment, they're like, this is what I'm excited about. But I'll miss that. But now I'm excited to kind of be on the other side of that and let somebody else tell me the stories that I can get excited about.
Well, Mike, it has been a pleasure working with you, and I appreciate you stopping by on the stream tonight. But Mike Ceide, a legendary career after 28 years in Memphis, best in the business.